Hello. So today we're going to talk about something that you could call almost the first American Revolution. Uh, that is, this is a couple of revolutions that take place in the colonies uh, at the same time, and in important ways, they do set the groundwork for the real American Revolution to come. And we're going to try to understand why. What we're talking about is the Glorious Revolution, um, an event that takes place in England, but we're going to be talking about its ramifications in the colonies and trying to understand how this both reflects and shapes the culture that is developing in these colonies as they start to grow up. So, in 1642, there was a civil war in England. The monarch Charles I was overthrown by the forces of Parliament. Charles I was seen as having Catholic tendencies, being dangerously close to being a Catholic tyrant. You remember we talked about that idea that Catholicism sort of represents tyranny and superstition and absolute iron-fisted monarchy, whereas Protestantism was seen as representing a more liberal, free system of government, nevertheless still a monarchy, but with more liberties for its subjects. This was part of the identity that the English had, and so that was very much part of the idea of the so-called Roundheads, who were the forces of Parliament, who were also very fierce religious Protestants. Eventually, their rule under Oliver Cromwell ends. The monarchy returns with the restoration of Charles II, who is seen as still a little bit suspect. He's a little too sympathetic to France. He's maybe flirting with Catholicism. And his heir, James II, as it turns out, is going to be full-on Catholic, and that is really going to bother people. So you're going to get a sort of revolution in which a Dutch prince, an eminently Protestant prince, William of Orange, is sort of invited to invade. He invades England with the support of Parliament, and he overthrows James, and William, becomes king, and his wife, Mary, becomes queen. So let's talk about the effects this event, though, had in the colonies. So first, you want to understand a little about what James II's policy was like in the colonies and how that was received. So one of the most dramatic things James II did, you can read about this in your textbook, was create something called the Dominion of New England. The Dominion of New England linked together various colonies, some of which we would consider part of New England now, some of which we wouldn't. Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey into a single entity. Now, all of these colonies, they were governed under different systems, but they all had enjoyed a certain level of self-government. I know I've sort of skipped over how did all these colonies get here. They develop over time. We start from, Plymouth and Virginia. Over time, a multitude of colonies, ultimately, as you probably know, totaling 13, develop along the eastern seaboard of the contemporary United States. The ones that are going to be put into this Dominion of New England are Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey. And it is removing a lot of their self-government and concentrating it under a single governor, Edmund Andros. So part of the motives for this, one was in the wake of events like King Philip's War, which we just talked about. It was to increase defense against attacks by natives, but it was also to ensure obedience to certain acts that were meant to make sure that colonists were only trading with approved trading partners, particularly just trading with England and other English colonies, a policy called mercantilism, where England, doesn't want its colonies to be trading with people on the outside because that's revenue that is lost to England. So you can already see how this might be seen. Remember that there was some suspicion of James II. I mean, more than suspicion, he seems to be showing Catholic tendencies and then really converts to Catholicism, and he's doing this thing that seems to be clamping down on the liberty, the economic and political liberty of his subjects in the New World. And they're definitely going to kind of see it that way. There's a lot of hostility to the governor that's appointed, Edmund Andros. Now, another thing you need to understand is that there's a culture of anti-Catholic paranoia, both in England and in the New World. And in the New World, that anti-Catholic paranoia is going to be closely intertwined with anti-Indian paranoia. There continue to be attacks by Indians in this period, and a bunch of those attacks are coming from Indians who have relationships with the French to the north, where they're established in Canada. And so the French are Catholic, and the Indians are maybe perceived as being under Catholic control. This idea that the Catholics like to use people who the English might perceive as sort of naive or easily manipulated partly originated with the experience of colonizing Ireland, which we've talked about, where the so-called wild, savage Irish were also very committed to Catholicism. And there's also a fear in this sort of anti-Catholic, anti-Indian paranoia of the enemy within. What if there are, Catholic agents within the English government, within the English colonies that are sort of working their will? There's particular paranoia about these missionaries called Jesuits, who are regarded as, being very good at disguising themselves and insinuating themselves into different places and spreading the message of Catholicism and undermining Protestant societies. So there's this culture of paranoia and anxiety, and that is going to ultimately extend to the idea that, okay, our king is corrupt. Our king and his agents are corrupt. They've been corrupted by this Catholic influence. So when the Glorious Revolution happens in England, when that news reaches the colonies, you get rebellions that take place in the colonies. Two of the big ones is there's a rebellion in New York, and there is also a rebellion in Boston. In 1689, so the year after the Glorious Revolution, or in the following year from that in which the Glorious Revolution takes place. And these revolts are going to overthrow Edmund Andros and the appointed governor in New York. The Dominion of New England is going to go away, and some sort of diversity of self-government is going to be returned to these colonies. The colonists are going to swear their allegiance to William and Mary. William and Mary you can think of as almost having, remember we talked about Ferdinand and Isabella? There's a lot of enthusiasm for William and Mary. They represent the return of Protestant liberty and the return of a government that's going to care about the colonists and protect them adequately against the Indians, whereas before maybe their government was seen as sort of being in league with the Indians. So there's going to be a feeling of patriotism and goodwill for a time, but we're going to see how even that can eventually be undermined by a culture of anxiety, resentment, and paranoia, and we're going to talk about that in our next video. Thank you.